I like big cav and I cannot lie. That's it. That's the end of the video. We're done. See you guys next week. Alright, so today I want to talk about Monstrous Cavalry. Dudes on horseback are obviously nothing new in Total War. They have a long and storied history in the series dating back almost 2 decades to Shogun 1. Companions, Sacred Band, Great Guard, Praetorians, Tagmata, Sassanid, Byzantine, and Parthian cataphracts, Burgundian Royal Lancers, and pretty much any heavy cav in Medieval 2. The list goes on and on and on, and many of these remain to this day battle-changing units. The type of elites who can completely swing the momentum of combat with a single decisive charge. The backbreakers and the money makers of any army. They win you games and look badass while doing it. And even in Warhammer, a setting with skyscraping constructs, powerful gunpowder, and fire-breathing dragons, we've seen normal cav units continue to make a large impact on battles. In fact, as players have gotten better since the release of Warhammer 1, the meta has shifted more and more towards high mobility, spreading the field and creating avenues for fast movers to make their presence felt. But up to this point, we've only seen a handful of representatives for that upper echelon of mounted troops known as Monstrous Cavalry, a class completely unto itself in the Warhammer world. The Tomb Kings have their Necropolis Knights, the Empire have their Demigryphs, and that's pretty much it. And for their part, Demigryph Knights have been a staple of multiplayer and campaign since the first days of Total War Warhammer. They excel at hunting down large targets and can be absolutely dominant when used effectively. They've enjoyed their time at the pinnacle for quite a while now, but their reign of terror is coming to an end. They are but a shadow, a pale imitation of the monsters yet to be unleashed upon the release of Warhammer 3, a time when the real heavyweights of Warhammer Fantasy will hit the global stage for the first time. So let's talk about some of the best examples of Monstrous Cavalry in Warhammer Fantasy, the races they're a part of, and what kind of impact they will have when they make landfall sometime in the year of our Lord 2020. And I guess the first question is, what is Monstrous Cavalry, and what makes it different from regular cav? Well, unit classifications are a bit wonky in Warhammer, not gonna lie. For example, Cold Ones, Horde Ones, and Dread Knights are not classified as Monstrous Cav, despite the fact they are riding gigantic raptors that can swallow a full-grown human male in a single bite. I don't know about y'all, but I personally feel like they fit that billing to a T. At the end of the day, it all comes down to model size and special rules, and we'll dive right into the 8th edition rulebook for clarification, then explain how all of that might translate to Total War. Just as horse-sized beasts can be pressed into service as mounts, so can their monstrous cousins. Such monstrous cavalry are incredibly rare, as most such creatures are so strong-willed that great patience, or violence, is needed to break them to the point at which they can be used safely as a mount. This combination of mass and stubborn muscle makes regiments of Monstrous Cav a much feared force upon the battlefields of the Warhammer world. All cavalry rules apply to Monstrous Cavalry with 2 exceptions. Monstrous Cav always uses the highest toughness and wounds characteristics the model has, rather than automatically using the riders, which, considering how powerful many of these mounts are, generally means the stat line for the unit is based around the mount itself, rather than the rider. And this is what gives them such an advantage in a head-on engagement with lesser mounted troops. I mean, sure, horses can be trained to kick and bite and even charge headlong into enemy formations, but their damage output is somewhat lacking when compared with mechanical demon bull rhinos from hell, or saber-toothed tiger yetis the size of a Ford F-150. So when you take a monster like that and mount him up with an elite warrior that's trained for decades or even centuries in the art of killing, that's gonna be a pretty damn potent combination. And on top of that, there are 3 special rules that make them what they are on the tabletop: Stomp, Monstrous Ranks, and Monstrous Support. Now, Stomp is just like it sounds, an extra attack made by a raging mount that automatically hits one nearby enemy model. And believe it or not, there is already a blueprint for this effect in Mortal Empires. Chariots and Mammoths already are the only units in the game that cause additional damage when moving through enemy formations. Although you could make a good argument that effect is more closely tied to impact hits from the tabletop, because Chariots could not have Stomp, But an even better example is the effect added to giants in SFO Grimhammer, where in a very small AoE at the base of their feet, models take additional damage over time to simulate the pulping and pulverizing effect of standing beneath a 15-ton behemoth as it stumbles around. The Monstrous Rank special rule means only 3 models are needed to count for rank bonus, and only a 6-model frontage is needed to count as a horde, which in practical Total War terms just means the unit size will typically be between 10 and 24 models, while most normal cav units are between 45 and 60. And Monstrous Support just means the rider can attack alongside his beast. When you combine those two together, the rider and the mount, you're talking about some serious devastation. So on paper, it's pretty clear what puts this unit type ahead of its peers. Higher mass, more HP, and pure unadulterated raw carnage. The type of DPS that can make even a demigryph blush. But since we know unequivocally Total War Warhammer 3 will usher in a new age of Monstrous Cav, let's put the spotlight on some of the best examples we can expect to see in this third game of the trilogy, what makes them special, and how their arrival will shape the meta itself. And the best race to highlight first are the Ogres themselves, because this is the faction through which Monstrous Cav will make the biggest impact. Literally. As we've covered before in the Ogre Kingdom's lore, army, and tactics video, this is a bruising, brutish race that is pound for pound the strongest in the setting, and their heavy hitters are no exception. Picture a woolly rhinoceros the size of a tractor trailer, with the teeth and killing power of a Smilodon, and the temperament of a honey badger. And oh yeah, they hunt in packs. Welcome to Mournfangs. On day 1 of Warhammer 3, expect Mournfang Cavalry to immediately take the top spot for best heavy cav unit in the game, in Mortal Empires, period. Straight up. The type of unit that gives Chaos Knights, Blood Knights, and Grail Knights nightmares. Incredibly tanky and resilient to damage, 120 armor plus, huge HP pool, and a devastating charge. Their weapon loadouts give them the tactical flexibility to take on pretty much any threat in the game. Expect to see an Iron Fist variant that fills a similar role to Chaos Knights with sword and board, or Demis with lances, one that's better used in prolonged mono-e-mono combat, and also a Great Weapon variant with more armor piercing and a bonus for large for hunting cav and monsters with a smaller stat pool, which will likely be the truly meta-defining version. There's just something about being able to guarantee you win the cav fight out on the flanks that gives you a huge leg up on an opponent, be they AI or a real human in multiplayer. But the scary thing is, Mournfangs aren't the most powerful cav unit in the Ogre Kingdom's arsenal. That honor will go to Rhinox Riders from Forge World, a unit I do not expect to see on launch day, but would be perfect as a headlining seller for a Lord Pack later down the line. As we know at this point, Forge World content is very much on the table, from Skin Wolves to Fimir, War Mammoths to the terrifying Necrofax Colossus, so Rhinox Riders could very well be on the agenda, and they could move product all by themselves. Just take a look at them. They are gorgeous. And if you let them get in charge range, you are already dead. I mean, units will just evaporate when a pack of woolly rhinos with iron guts up top slam right into them. It'll just be red mist. Rhinoxen take everything Mournfang do and take it from an 11 to a 12. More impact hits, more Vulcan stomp stomp, a higher armor save, and a bad temper to boot. My idea to balance out what will quite literally be the strongest, if not the outright best heavy cav unit in the setting, because speed and maneuverability and other factors come into play obviously, would be to force them into committing to a charge once an attack order has actually been issued. So unlike Rampage, you have full control of the unit until you decide to commit them with an attack order at a close enough distance, at which point they will barrel right to that target, pancaking absolutely anything they can that stands in their way. But I'm not sure that would even be required. The absurd price tag of well over 2,000 gold, large hitbox, and issues they face when on the business end of stuff like cannon fire means they will be a risky investment unto themselves in a lot of situations, which is exactly how a good game is balanced. If they're going to be killing lots of stuff, there have got to be counters to them as well. Rhinox and Mournfangs will be the win conditions of many an Ogre army, and they have me tremendously excited, but they are far from the only elites looking to flex their muscles in the Darklands, Mountains of Morn, and Chaos Wastes in Game 3. And these next two aren't technically Monstrous Cav, but they are cavalry that are monsters that will likely play a big role in the success of their respective factions. And on paper, I think Demonettes and their Seekers of Slaanesh are going to be one of the most effective units in the game at their price point. We've already seen how incredibly strong mobile magical light cav can be when paired with high physical resist. Doomfire Warlocks dominated the Dark Elves meta after the Queen and the Crone released, and even after their nerfs, are still incredibly good at what they do. Seekers of Slaanesh for the Daemons of Chaos will probably be very much the same. At movement 10, and as the personal harem of the Dark Prince, gotta go fast, they'll be making Centaurs and Wild Riders look like they're moving in a jar of molasses. And all that mobility is a huge deal. When trying to shut down an opposing army's range play, or striking at an unprotected flank, all that stuff is going to be really important at getting in at the squishy targets and shutting them down for good. They'll have none of the brute force or the raw killing power of stuff like ogre monsters, but they can run circles around them all day long. And with armor piercing and poison, they have a toolkit that is quite impressive amongst even the best light cavalry in Warhammer. Really squishy, but insane mobility you cannot run when they hit the field in force. If you get caught out or put a unit in a bad position with them nearby, you're gonna have to live with that decision because your only option is to fight or die. I actually think Seekers might end up being one of the stronger units in Warhammer 3. More impactful than even some of the true monstrous units on this list because of that speed, because of their poison, because of their armor piercing. They will always be where you need them to be when you need them to be there, and it's hard to put a price tag on a trait that useful. But it wouldn't be a good discussion without some Dawizar loving as well. Maybe the most anticipated race for a lot of players, simply because they've never really gotten any love in video game form before. Their aesthetic is amazing. I mean, who doesn't love Babylonian beards and epic hats? And they combine the best aspects of the Dwarfs, the Skaven, the Daemons of Chaos, and even a sprinkling of greenskins in there as well. Sure, they've got ranged firepower and lava-infused constructs for days, and sure, they've got demon-forged legions and sturdy phalanxes of high-mass infantry, but they also have bull centaurs, taking the one weakness of the dwarfs, spinning on it, then flesh sculpting a new monstrosity with high mobility and cornate rage even a bloodthirster could be proud of. Bull centaur Tauruks are the largest and most powerful of their kind, hulking and savage creatures that serve the Chaos Dwarf legions as shock troops and temple guardians, twisted into a form most pleasing to their dark father Hashut. Bull centaurs are technically counted as monstrous beasts on the tabletop, but depending on CA's interpretation of them, they may very well end up being considered as monstrous cav. And at the end of the day, they are indeed heavy cavalry who are monsters, so take that as you will. With scaly skin and strong armor, they hit hard, are very difficult to bring down, can be equipped with armor-piercing mauls and great weapons, and will likely have flaming attacks as well, meaning they are perfect for hunting down Nurgle-themed units or Hydras and Trolls. Bull Centaur renders are the ultimate bridge to what the Dawi themselves are lacking, and on a roster that is already well suited to grinding you down with powerful artillery while their armored legions hold a line, adding a monstrous cav threat out on the flanks will make the Chaos Dwarfs of Zar Nagrund that much more difficult to deal with. The main difference being, it will likely be difficult for the Dawizar to field a full army of actual Chaos Dwarfs, while the Dwarfs of the World's Edge Mountains don't typically have that issue. Power creep? Maybe. It remains to be seen how they'll be balanced, but on paper, their faction is looking like it will be really strong when it hits the battlefields of Total War Warhammer 3. Would not be surprised in the slightest to see them bulldoze their way right to the top of the multiplayer meta in the early days after launch. And then, there are the warriors of the Blood God, the Blood Crushers and Skull Crushers of Khorne. My personal favorites, with all the ideals and visuals of what Monstrous Cavalry can and should be, rolled into one delicious, vicious package. A class that stands at the pinnacle of pure killing power for all mounted units in the setting. And we've got Blood Crushers, the demon variant, riding Juggernauts, a mighty steed of groaning iron and brazen steel, part hound, part bull, all righteous burning hate, ridden by bloodletters in a battle. And Skull Crushers are the Warriors of Chaos variant, the same mount, but this time ridden by mortal champions of Khorne, clad head to toe in the crimson armor of Karneth himself. With blood of molten fire and incredible mass, we've not seen a unit of Cav in Mortal Empires yet that would enjoy taking these beasts on in a 1v1 fight. Even the Royal Altdorf Griffites will be outmatched in a head-on engagement. And their strength is on full display on the tabletop too. Skull Crushers of Khorne were considered one of the strongest Warriors of Chaos options in their 8th edition army book when it was first released, and even to this day, that remains true. They got a points increase, and they've continued in that role as Blender Lords. on the tabletop and are still one of the best picks. With Brass Behemoth, giving them +2 to their armor save, a value that could easily translate to 130 armor in Warhammer 3, and an absolutely devastating charge, they will be the vanguard of many a Khornate army and are poised to become some of the premier cavalry units in this trilogy. And then there's Kislev Bearcav. On launch day, we're getting Kislev, and we're getting Bearcav, and by God, will it be glorious. I will die on that hill if I have to. It needs to happen. CA, hear our cries. And look, I'm hyping up these units for a good reason. They're gonna be really strong in Total War Warhammer 3, without question. In a head-on 1v1 collision, at least one of these units, probably the Rhinox, and if the Rhinox don't make it, which I doubt they won't, then Mornfangs, at least one of them will be close to unbeatable in a head-on fight. But that does not mean they'll be unstoppable on the battlefield itself, because battles aren't fought in a 1v1 scenario. They aren't fought in a bunch of duels. If you find yourself staring down a horde of angry Rhinox or the Skull Crushers of Khorne, don't take them on in a head-on-head scrap. Outmaneuver them, skirmish them, harass them, blast them apart with ranged units, drag them to the muck with meat shields, with artillery, whittle them down to size, and then when they're finally committed, hit them with everything you've got and watch as even the heaviest mounted units in the setting fall to pieces. It's going to be incredibly interesting to see what talented players can do with them and see how they can be countered on the battlefields of Total War Warhammer 3. But there's no question in my mind, Game 3 will be the age of Monstrous Cav, and there are a lot of awesome specimens that are on their way soon. It's going to be a good show. Let me know what units in particular have you most excited for Total War Warhammer 3. Feel free to leave video ideas in the comment section below if anything springs to mind, and I will see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.